Hi, I'm Herb Senning, President of the Vendor Management Office and author of The Vendor Management Office, a How-To Guide. This is an introductory video to give you some background and insight into the product and describe it a little bit more for you so that you'll understand what you're purchasing. What is the Vendor Management Office, a How-To Guide? It is a detail-oriented, step-by-step process on how to create, operate, and manage a vendor management office. In addition, the same concepts and principles and deliverables in this manual are used to manage vendors. The product includes a manual that describes each of the programs within the Vendor Management Office, gives you a presentation that you can use to discuss this with your manager or to sell this idea with your management team. And also gives you a very detailed step-by-step work plan, again, on how to create, operate, and manage a vendor management office or manage your vendors. The CD includes the electronic copies of many of the components in the manual. It also gives you sample deliverables and templates. And the DVD gives you excerpts like this of me explaining some of the components of the vendor management office, and also training sessions that I've put on. I created the Vendor Management Office, a How-To Guide, because I thought the success of many of the vendor relationships that I dealt with were really dependent upon the people and not so much on the process or how we manage those vendors. Very similar to projects and how projects were managed maybe 10 to 15 years ago, where the success of the project was dependent on the project manager you had and not on the process. Today that's not the case in project management. Today many companies have project management offices. They have strict guidelines, standards, deliverable templates, and a process that you have to go through to manage a project. And that's what I want to create in the Vendor Management Office. I want to provide a structure so all of our vendors are managed the same way, that we use the same process at a high level, and so the success of the vendor relationship is no longer solely dependent upon the person, but more dependent upon the process that we use to manage it. I also think that there's a greater move towards outsourcing. We've already seen that, but I just see the trend continuing on. And so where I might have been a functional manager of a function, soon all of us are potentially going to have the opportunity to be a relationship manager or a vendor manager of a function. So the components of the VMO, or the Vendor Management Office, and here's the programs that I think you're interested in. The first program in the Vendor Management Office is the Performance Review Program, and that's where we're reviewing the vendor's performance. We're looking at their SLAs, we're looking at the contract deliverables that were delivered that month, and any issues or any work that we're doing around the performance of that vendor. The second component is the Contractual Review Program, and this is where we're looking at the contract solely. We're looking at the changes that are being moved through the process and any upcoming changes that we need to get prepared for. So we're kind of managing the contract at that point. The third component is the Account Review Program, and in the Account Review Program we're going to take a higher level view of the vendor and what they're providing, the services. Maybe it's every half year or every quarter look, and this gives the vendor a chance to talk about the accomplishments that they've had in this quarter or this half year, and also that they can bring forward their value add opportunities for us. So these are things that they've seen in the industry or seen in our operations that are above and beyond just the delivery of the services. So this is where we get a little bit more from these vendors than just the services that we've purchased. The next component is a supplier review meeting. This is an internal review meeting where we're looking at our vendors, comparing our vendors against each other, looking at what's working great at one vendor and not at another vendor, and see if we can help each other inside the company manage these vendors better. The next component is the satisfaction surveys. We need to be doing satisfaction surveys inside our company of the vendor, and the other way around. We want to send the vendor a customer satisfaction survey on how well we're doing to kind of make this a well-rounded relationship. And out of those satisfaction surveys, we'll have action items on how to improve our performance. The next component is the Financial Management Program. That's where we're looking at, from an objective view, the invoices and the accuracy of the invoices and making sure that that's all right. We're also looking at benchmarking. How are we still doing against the industry in this service or this product? And also the the business case related to why we made this deal and whether we're marking against that still or tracking against that. There will also be a dispute management program. This is how we manage disputes. There's going to be disputes in the process, and we just need a clear way of managing those through and describing that to everybody so everybody knows what that process is. We have a risk management program. This is where we talk about the risks that we evaluate of this vendor or this supplier or this contract. We do this very well in the very beginning of the contract through the RFP phases, and then we kind of don't really revisit that again regularly throughout the life of that contract. And then the functional management program. This is the day-to-day, week-to-week functional manager, subject matter expert. This is how those guys work on a day-to-day basis. I think what's also important in this program is that there's an equal and true partnership. So where I know the company wants to get a lot out of it and the vendor wants to get a lot out of it, I don't want this to be a how do you beat up the vendor, and it actually is far from that. We really want to get the most from both parties out of this. We want to get extra value out of the relationship and the value that we paid for, and they want to get the value and from the commitment that they're making to our company. From a scope perspective, this program can be used on any supplier relationship you have or vendor relationship or any contractual relationship you have. From a how this can be modified to the size, you may have very complicated arrangements which may require a lot of the programs I just discussed, or you maybe have very simple relationships with vendors or a simple contract that only may require one or two of these components and may happen less frequently. So it's very customizable to us creating a whole vendor management office where we're managing 60 to 40 vendors, or whether it's just you managing one vendor, a lot of the same concepts can be used. It's very similar to how you manage a project. On smaller projects, you're going to use 2 or 3 things of the methodology. On a larger project, you're going to maybe use all of the components of the methodology. Another thing that's very important in the vendor management office and this how-to guide is that you're demonstrating value. Your work is going to die if you're not able to prove to the company that you're able to save the company money. And we'll go through some of those details because there's hard and soft savings that can be gained from this, and I think they're important. And again, your efforts will die if you're not showing your savings. I think one of the ways that you demonstrate those savings is that we're going to find services that weren't being performed before or weren't being performed at the right level through this vendor management office, the how-to guide. So there'll be savings there. I believe you're going to have less vendor turnover because of this, which there's some savings there. It's very costly to change and switch from one vendor to the other. We'll also be able to expedite contract changes through the system faster, and those should bring, especially for instances where those contract changes are very beneficial to the company, the faster those things go through, the better off we are. We're going to be able to reduce the risk of this contract, and that should bring value. We'll have better invoice accuracy, more accuracy to the business case, more accuracy to the benchmarking, and that will bring value. And then overall, I think we're going to improve our overall vendor relationship, and I think that's better for providing service both from the vendor and from our relationship with that vendor. And I think we're doing a lot of this value, or we get a lot of this value through creating a standard structured approach with rules and kind of guidelines on how we're going to operate in this relationship. So it's very out on the table in front of everybody on here's how we're going to manage the relationship, here's how we're going to work together, which a lot of contracts don't provide. They describe here's what the services are, but they don't describe how we're going to manage those services. The vendor management office how-to guide is also going to clarify and allow the contract to be operationalized. So we're going to be very detailed and very specific about what does the contract say, almost to a layman's perspective, or something that I can understand and you can understand and the vendor can understand, not the lawyers in the process, but the people who are doing the work and receiving the services. And we're going to be able to look at those and be able to measure them, identify them, know when we're getting them or not getting them. the services that you've purchased or the services that you're going to get. And again, this is going to create a true partnership, which I think out of a true partnership is where the additional value comes from that you're paying for. So this concludes the video introduction. I hope it gave you a great background into what this product is, a little bit more flavor of why I created and the value it can bring to you. Thank you.